Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second Arab Women's Film Festival in Brazil. I am Ana Lubambiha, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us in this amazing roundtable that's going to happen. This festival is being presented by the tourism minister, the Brazilian tourism ministry, and sponsored by Banco do Brasil. And also presented by Centro Cultural Banco do Brasil do Rio de Janeiro. I would like to introduce our guests. This roundtable is called Palestinianness, Body and Territory. And it's going to be moderated by Fernando Resende, Daniele, Regina, ABILAS, and our guests, DINA, MATAR, RIHAM, Isaac, and MAHASEN, NASSER-ELSIN. This roundtable is about being a woman in this territory in Palestine, and you can see that I'm speaking English, and if you are in the Portuguese link, you are hearing Tatiana Abreu's voice. That is our translator. Thank you very much for being here. If you would like to listen to the original audio, if you're the Portuguese one and you would like to listen to the original one, there is the link in the chat. And if you are listening to the original audio and you would like the Portuguese translation, you can also find the other link as well. So I've had everybody a good time, a good roundtable. Dani, it's up to you.
Hello, everyone. It's such an honor to me and Fernando. He will speak just after me. But it is a pleasure and an honor to be part of this roundtable that brings together strong, important Palestinian women that are voicing through their work narratives that are silenced or have not been heard in the way they should. And more than ever, or as always, now it's a moment that it's very intense for each and everyone in Palestine, for each and everyone in Al-Shatat, in the diaspora, for each and everyone and seeking for asylum, for refugee. We thought about bringing this, each of one here, Dina Matar, as a scholar, researcher, and there's this incredible book, What It Means to Be a Palestinian, that was very inspiring as well in the process of building up this roundtable. And also Mahasen Nasser-ELSIN, that is one of the directors that are blessing us in this incredible film festival that give us the opportunity to see through very sensitive lens the historical process of the Palestinian people, the Palestinian territory. So it's an honor for us to have you here as well. And the RIHAM Isaac, that is this incredible artist that I had the opportunity to meet and to observe doing my ethnographical field work research during the years of 2013 until 2016 in Bethlehem. It was very inspiring for myself, every conversation that we had. And I'm happy that the Brazilian audience have the opportunity now to meet you. So thank you, each of you, for being here. And this leads me to say a little bit about myself. I'm Daniele Abilas. I'm an anthropologist with research being developed with Palestinian, first with Palestinian refugees in Brazil and their families in the refugee camps in Lebanon. That was my master's degree research. And in the PhD, I went to Bethlehem, and I spent 3 years developing research that is still ongoing. I'm still in process of writing. So it was very intense. I was there doing Gaza attacks in 2014. And now in the last weeks was very also intense, remembering how it's the reality on the ground. So for the ones that are joining us in this roundtable, I'm finishing my introduction just to say that as we see, Palestine is a territory and an experience that permeates bodies. It is composed of lived memories, which are felt, told, and retold by generations that pile up and transit through bordered, multiple, and disputed spaces. So Palestine, it's a lot of things. And to belong to a Palestinian body, which is also a territory, also a symbol, an imagination, a political and social scenario, and in the different places that you might be on that moment, or born or living. So it is an honor for us to have these three incredible Palestinian women voices to tell us a little bit. So Fernando, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dani. Can you hear me well? Is it fine? The sound is okay? Yeah. So as Dani said, I am also honored to be here with you all. I'd like, first of all, to thank the organization of the Second Arab Women's Film Festival. First of all, for showing us, right, allowing us to see these incredible films, and also helping them do what I think it's important mainly nowadays, which is to cross borders between places that are apart only physically, because I have no doubt, as much as I work with issues related to the Middle East and Palestine, I have no doubt how subjectively speaking, we are very much close to each other. So this festival, I think, plays a very important role of allowing us all to make contacts and to share the experiences we all have. And I would also like to thank the organization for trusting me and Dani the task of organizing this conversation, and to have, it was a pleasure to share the organization with Daniele. We both had great conversations. I mean, we brought back some memories of ours. So it was a very interesting experience until we got to this point here. So we are very happy to be here because of this too. I also want to thank our three guests for accepting our invitation. You can be sure that we did think of your names very dearly and very sure of how much you can contribute to this issue of crossing borders that I mentioned before. So I'm very happy and I'm very thankful for you, DINA, for MAHASEN, for RIHAM. I'm delighted to have the three of you here with us. We thought of beginning with DINA MATAR by speaking, and DINA is someone I know since 2011, when I first presented part of my research at SOAS, at the School of Oriental and African Studies, where DINA works as a reader, right, as a professor. I met her again in 2013 when I went for my postdoc studies at SOAS. Then DINA was my supervisor, and I was very lucky and I was very privileged to be with her and to talk with her for the whole year I spent in London. You can be sure, DINA, that you have inspired much of what I've been doing since then. You have not only inspired this roundtable, but also much of what I have been doing since then. So just a quick presentation of DINA. DINA is a reader at SOAS at the School of Oriental and African Studies, and is chair of the Center for Palestinian Studies. She is also the author of What It Means to Be Palestinian, that Daniele has already mentioned. She's a co-author of Hezbollah Phenomenon from 2014, co-editor of Gaza as Metaphor from 2016, and Narrating Conflict in the Middle East, a book that was launched, I think it was 2015 or so anyway. I mean, I'm there with a chapter too. And she's a co-founder of the Middle East Journal of Culture and Communication. DINA works on political communication in the Middle East, political cultures, media and activism, narrative and identities, memories and Palestinian oral history. And she previously worked as a journalist and editor in the Middle East, Europe, Asia, and in the United States. DINA, we would like to hear, as we talked before, about your experience as a professor now, as a journalist before, as a woman, as a Palestinian that lives in the diaspora. I mean, I'm sure you have a lot to tell us. I would just like to provoke you by beginning with a question that you have in the very beginning of your book, when you ask yourself how to answer to the question what it means to be Palestinians. You kind of let us understand from your words here that what it means to be Palestinian, you say, is about lived experiences and conditions of being which change and shift as a result of evolving circumstances and conditions. I think this very much describes what we here are trying to understand as this connection between territory and body. So if you could please perhaps also talk about this, talk about oral history, which is something that you have long worked with, and talk about whatever you find important and interesting to tell us. So we begin with DINA, and then we go to MAHASEN and then RIHAM. But then DINA, thank you. It's your turn now.
Thank you, Fernando, and thank you everyone, and for the organizers, really wonderful opportunity to be able to talk, particularly during this very difficult time for Palestine and Palestinians. But really thinking about it, when the latest events happened, I was kind of just thinking personally about the number of Israeli wars and attacks against Palestinians that I myself have witnessed, not personally, perhaps witnessed from across borders, but also personally as well. And, you know, I counted around 15. So it is quite a lot over a lifetime to keep kind of having to experience the trauma and the kind of difficulties that Palestinians, particularly in Gaza and in the occupied territories, have been experiencing for a long time. But Fernando asked me specific questions. I mean, and then also in response to the introduction, particularly by Dani and her work. And what is it? You know, what are we talking about? What is Palestine? Is it a global phenomena? Can we think about it as a global phenomena, a global concern? And this is, for me, is actually a crucial point. It is a global concern because it's not territorial, it's trans-territory, it's across territory, it's not a space, it's a spatiality, it's not a time, it's a temporality. And the way that we think about these is that these are interconnected issues that kind of impinge on other issues that matter to the humanity in different ways.
And I think one of the important things I would like to mention as we start is that I do work with media, and I kind of critically engage with or try and understand what is it, what does media do, and what do we do with media. And I think that importantly, I've always been very pessimistic around the role of media, because I've always felt that it was almost deterministic to say media are powerful. But also it was very wrong not to think about the structures of media, you know, meaning the political economic structures of media, who controls media and so on. But recently, and particularly in the last year and so on, particularly in the last few weeks, following the latest attacks against Palestinians, and I really want to mention that these are attacks against Palestinians that are different than any other attacks, because these attacks happened on different fronts. They happened against Palestinians in Jerusalem and in the occupied territories. It happened against Palestinians in Gaza, and also they happened against so-called, Arab citizens of Israel. So the Palestinians who have remained in what is, in Israel since after 1948. So, and then the attack is also global in the sense it's an attack against the Palestinian voice. So we have had the closure of, the attempts to try and silence the Palestinian voice, with Facebook closing down or blocking websites that they saw as being inciting hate speech. So I wanted to put that in at the start of my discussion because it informs my understanding and my kind of argument that I started with the book about the lived experiences, Palestine, or what it means to be Palestinian as a lived experience. It's a lived experience of continued colonial, settler colonial practices. And we have to put that at the table at the beginning. What does it mean to be exposed or to experience continuous settler colonial practices in different fronts, on different fronts, in different ways, and in different perspectives. So this is what really matters at this moment in time. And I find myself, as I grow older, that I get much more, kind of convinced that the more we Palestinians speak out in different ways, the better it is. And I've been very encouraged by the agency and the way that agency of the youth. Well, we do have on this panel some important people who are also kind of producing visual stories about Palestinian lives, which is really important. But so again, just to emphasize, Fernando talked about the idea of borders. What are borders? How are borders made? Who makes the borders? Who controls borders? But again, thinking beyond the idea of borders, because that's the way that we have to think. If the Palestinian voice and the Palestinian experience is going to survive, as it has survived so far, then it is important to think beyond borders, to think beyond territoriality. And Fernando and another colleague, they put together a fantastic book, which they invited me to write a chapter for. And it was around the idea, and Fernando, has written about that. It's around the idea of spatiality, thinking beyond the idea of space, and trying to engage with post-colonial and critical thinking in trying to understand the Palestinian experience. But to go back to the book and to go back to what I myself think about what it means to be Palestinian, I think I find it very hard to talk about myself in this context. What does it mean to be Palestinian? Sort of in a sense, you are almost by people, and I don't mean it to this panel, but people asking you the question, what does it mean to be a Palestinian? And what does it mean to be a woman? Sort of makes me feel that there is this perception of exceptionality that being a Palestinian can be looked at as being an exceptional case of a human being. And I kind of resent that. Immediately I resent it. I kind of don't want to answer the question, because it is exceptional experience in the sense that it's the longest struggle against settler colonialism in contemporary history. The Palestinian struggle for existence, for rights, for self-determination, is the longest one. But also, in a sense, it is not exceptional for Palestinians to demand their human rights and to ask for the right to exist and the right to narrate and the right to self-determination. Edward Said wrote about the need for narration, the need to tell stories. And I think this has been kind of championed by particularly the younger generation, because the older generation were very reluctant to talk about personal issues. And the second question, when people ask me, okay, as a woman, I also find that as being also restricted. I've never thought of myself as a woman, but of course, when in my practices as a journalist or as as an academic, but of course, it imposes, the condition imposes itself on me. The situation, the experience of being a woman imposes itself on me because of again, structural inequalities that we are all talking about right now. And we have been talking, people working on gender studies have been talking about for a very long time. And people concerned around women's rights have been talking about right now. And in a sense, when people ask me, and in a sense, I kind of put myself in the shoes of those people I interview for the book, is that when people ask me, what does it mean to be Palestinian? What do you think? What does it mean to be a woman? I do tend to begin to remember experiences of exclusion and experiences of being excluded and being silenced. And these begin to matter for me. And I've asked the question, why the silencing, why the exclusion? And this is where, it becomes more than just writing a book. It becomes more of a what we call in Arabic dude. It's like a worm wriggling inside you, telling you do something, and so on, and try and do something about that. I want to close with the oral history. What is that technique? And also because I'm currently beginning the sequel of the book. So the book is narratives and stories of a diverse, section of Palestinians whom I interviewed in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan, in Palestine, in the occupied territories, and also in Israel. And I interviewed 100 people. The book only has 35. And the idea of oral history research is it's research where you kind of you go and spend time with the people that you want to talk to, and it's almost anthropological in its approach. Ethnographic, participant observation. You spend a lot of time with the informants, but you ask some questions so that they can talk, and you allow them to talk, and then you try and think about, okay, why what they are saying is important. And the need for that to be kind of put on paper and to be heard by others. And the book that book has been quite successful in many ways, because I don't know whether you know about the film called The Tower, which is produced by a Norwegian filmmaker. So he based some of the material in the animation film called The Tower on he used some of the material from the book. It's a wonderful story. It's about this little girl who lives in Burj al-Barajneh refugee camp in Lebanon, and who kind of talks to her grandfather, and then her father, and then aunts and uncles. So in a way, it's telling the Palestinian story in a kind of narrative, chronological perspective. So the new book will be actually taking the story from 1993, which is the Oslo Agreement, and beginning with the Oslo and the post-Oslo period to the present. So it's going to be also a different, the same type of interviewing, but I'll probably structure it differently, and I'll probably engage with much more of an analytical perspective of what it means to be Palestinian. But the important thing about the oral history is the ways in which it allows for silenced voices to be heard. And these are the voices of ordinary people and not so ordinary people. And in a sense, you'll find that what brings them together, I mean, you find that remembering is a fickle thing. You don't remember accurately, but your feelings about events, your remembered feelings about certain events that you experienced and that you've gone through are the most important thing around that. So in a sense, and there's this, I think it's a Russian, I'm not sure, Russian writer who has written an oral history book around the women, you know, the Russian woman during the Soviet period. And these have voices of women that have also been silenced. And it's exactly the same. What comes through is this idea that you know, you're not really trying to write a history book. What you are trying to do is to emphasize and to center, to bring to the center remembered feelings that matter, that continue to matter, particularly now that we are beginning to understand that emotions, affect, and issues related to the very nature of human beings are really important for development, for progress, for you know, participation, for human rights, etc. I'd like to end here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk.
Dina, thank you very, very much. You have brought some very interesting points, and I do hope we have time to talk to you afterwards. I forgot to say that perhaps for personal reasons, Dina might have to leave before the end. So you feel free, Dina, if you have to go at the time you said you would need to. But I hope we do have time to come back to some points you have raised, and I mean, they're very, very interesting. So I think we pass the word now to Dani again, so that she will introduce MAHASEN, right, Dani? Thank you very much, Dina. Thank you very much. Your microphone, Dani, your microphone.
I'm sorry. Oh my God. Thank you so much, Dina. I do hope we will have time to dialogue a little bit. It was very good to hear you. And now I would like to introduce MAHASEN, NASSER-ELSIN. It is an honor. I got to know a little bit about MAHASEN through the film festival when I watched the movie that are being screened when we were thinking about the round table. That is the silent protest. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry for the noise. And it was very, very impacting for me how you found ways to bring this past pre-Nakba stories, and I think this connects a lot with what Dina was saying, right? So MAHASEN is a Jerusalem-born director. Her films tell stories of resistance and resilience in pre- and post-Nakba Palestine. I think some people might already watch the movie, and it's very clear how she brings the pre and the post Nakba in her art, and connecting this temporality. Mahasen graduated from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., with a master's in Arabic studies. She also holds a master's degree in filmmaking from Goldsmiths College, London. She currently teaches film production and film studies at the Dar al-Kalima University College of Art and Culture in Bethlehem, which is a beautiful, very innovative and creative space in Bethlehem district. And I would also like to quote you in an interview that you gave in Bright Stars of Bethlehem. You asked these questions: is history actually relevant? If so, how do we create representations of history that resonate with life today? How can we create cultural productions to further our understanding of subaltern histories and the present realities? So I thank you so much for producing what you are producing, for creating new languages, and for asking those questions. And I would love to hear.
Thank you so much, Dani, for this wonderful introduction. In fact, I'm very humbled. And yes, I mean, I should maybe start talking about why do I do the work that I do? Why do I make films? And specifically, you know, how I make them. And it's very much connected, in fact, to what Dina was saying. You know, the idea of how do you make narratives that are denied, that are stolen, accessible. And also, you know, how do you share this information? You know, how do you make them accessible, and how you share them with audiences? So my work basically focuses on how do we make history, how do we write history through image and sound? And this is also very much based on my work in the archives, researching the archives for a Palestinian story that is also very subjective, right? It's, you know, it's a story, it's a collective story, but it's also very personal. And I think, you know, because I would also like to draw around also the issue or the topic of the global phenomena of also, you know, Palestine and the work on Palestine. But I think, yes, I mean, when we talk about these historical stories, one of the very important thing is, you know, why is history important? You know, we make historical films, but these in my humble point of view, you know, we need history, and we need to look at history in a way that makes us understand the current context and the future contexts. So, you know, this is why a film like The Silent Protest, you know, it is in fact, and my previous work as well, it is in fact about the connectivity between the past and the present, which is also very much instigated by my work at Dar al-Kalima, by teaching students, art students and film students, film and art, you know. So slowly I started realizing, you know, how important it is for younger generations, you know, to talk about Palestine pre-1948, you know, because our history cannot begin with the Nakba, you know, it cannot just be at that point in time. So going back to pre-Nakba days, to pre-1948, became very integral to my work. And before the silent protest, I did a film on Karima Aboud, who's basically considered the first Palestinian female photographer, right? She was born in 1893. She died in 1940. She did not live through the Nakba, but yet she was able to create these images that were so much different than what we are used to seeing from from pre-Nakba Palestine. You know, the whole idea of you know, the land being empty, the land being inhabited by nomads, where now Karima Aboud brings us, allows us this window of opportunity to look at Palestinian culture, to see Palestinian women, and that's also very important because, you know, she had access to people's homes, and she had her studios. So, and when we compare her work to the works of other male photographers, we can see the difference and we can pinpoint to this important aspects of life in Palestine that, you know, we don't know about, unfortunately. And it's not that people have, you know, scholars and researchers and Palestinian scholars have not worked on it, but it's again the issue of accessibility, you know. And this is why I think film is a great venue that creates access. You know, it makes things, it makes the story accessible to people, you know, and then with presenting all the space for learning, understanding, comparing experiences, etc. But I mean, with the film that you see and that's being screened at the festival, I think it was really important for me to also look at very specific questions, feminist questions. You know, how did women in the past negotiate their realities? You know, and in the story of the film, we you know, it touches upon one day in the life of the women's movement. When Palestinian women decided to announce, you know, inaugurate their movement at a very difficult political time. It was the Buraq uprising back then. So they realized that they're gonna capture this moment. You know, the country is boiling. There is this moment in history that's taking place. So what better times than to say, yes, here we are, we exist, and we're gonna take part in politics. So the idea is also, you know, how do we as women carve space for ourselves in society? How do we as women carve space for ourselves in the public space? And I think this is also where the issue of the body and territory comes along. And this is why in the film, you know, you see young women in the landscapes, right, of Palestine today, of Jerusalem today. So in the film, what I tried to do, I mean, is to basically tell the story of what happened on that day when women decided to inaugurate their movement, and then they decided to go and present their demands to the Higher Commissioner in 1929. And of course, they were prohibited from carrying out a protest on foot. And funnily enough, you know, they were threatened by the Higher Commissioner, saying that, you know, we're gonna have your men hinder you from going on the streets. So it's also interesting with you know, colonization and settler colonization, how you know, the structures, you know, and the policies are used against women, and sometimes, you know, for women, right? But that's also, you know, another point that we can talk about. But basically, they were prohibited from carrying out a protest on foot. So they decided they're going to do a car, you know, they're going to do a silent protest and create this convoy of cars to roam the city and say and go around the two different consulates and present their demands to the different consuls at that time. But I also think, you know, like in terms of the film, also what is important, I think, to talk about is, you know, how do you actually construct such a story, right? Being a history that is really marginalized, considering that the Palestinian archives is really scattered all over the world. You know, Palestinians, we don't have a national archive. There are a lot of wonderful and serious efforts that are taking place to map this archives, and I'm very lucky to be one of the people who's working on that as well. But again, you know, the challenges that we go through in setting up such a story and putting such a story together when you don't have a national archive, when the archive is scattered, you know, all over the world, basically. So, you know, with the little and minimal resources that you have, you know, how do you do things? So here is where oral history is brought in. Here is where the work of other researchers is, you know, it's because it's also, you know, this type of work and this type of effort very much builds on previous generations and previous scholars and researchers, what they've done, Palestinian researchers, you know. So we take the work that our predecessors did, and now we take it further with the hopes that younger generations would also follow in the footsteps. So I see this effort also as a way to build on experiences, right? To build on you know, how do we write our history? How do we create access to our history? And then also, I think what is important in such a work is the questions themselves. You know, we as women, the narratives. You know, how do we look at women's demands, women's feminist demands, and we can call them feminist, even if in today's point of view they're very much different than what we look at feminism, or how we describe feminism. But in my opinion, these were very to the core feminist questions. And back then, you know, Palestinian women were saying that, okay, first we need to create our state, and then through our state we will get our rights. Which now we see a completely different outlook on things with the younger generations. And this is also where Palestine is not very Palestine specific. This is where also, you know, there are all these global questions about feminism and about protest and about rights of marginalized groups, how they would be brought together, you know, how we look at struggles through an overlapping lens. So now, for instance, Palestinian women are saying, well, the political is personal. You know, they are saying that, you know, maybe the whole state system is dysfunctional, and we need to look at other ways to bring about our rights and to talk about our rights. And you know what? National rights and women's rights could be the same in this time and in space. So, you know, I think, you know, the film really touches upon all these things. And again, this is this is very much linked to the work and the research that I've been working on for quite some time now. And I would also like to bring on the question of imagination, right? Because you've talked about this at the beginning of your talk. And this is very also relevant to the work that I do and the way I think about the missing archives, the stolen archive. So there is also this question. So, okay, the archive is missing, the archive is stolen, the archive, we are denied access to the archive. And this is a reality, you know, specifically when we start thinking about and talking about and identifying the materials that the Israeli state holds and denies us from access to it, is the idea of imagining an archive, right? Imagining a world that existed back then. So there is all this space to actually come and imagine the world from the past, but also imagine it through a lens that's very much relevant to the questions that we are going, you know, that we are asking ourselves today, that resonate with the times that we are living in today. So yeah, I think, you know, the silent protest is about all these things, and maybe I would stop here and you know, we can take it further if you like.
Thank you so much, Mahasen. Yes, there is one thing in the movie. There's a moment when the narration raised some questions like, would we in future, I don't have here the, the transcription, but it is something like, would we as women maybe regret of taking as a priority the national liberation, or this is the right path in a way. I found this very interesting. That is this.
Recording in progress.
Dani, shall we move then to
Yeah,
we move
okay.
to RIHAM and then we come back to the three for the questions? What do you think?
I think it's better. Yes.
Then, yeah. Just one thing I would like to mention, a word that was not mentioned, Mahasen, that I think it's very important in your work, that I see very, very strongly. It's the issue of memory, which is in fact, I think what you are doing, what you are building, what you are producing to, right? So I would like afterwards also to talk about this, right? But I am suggesting we move to RIHAM and then we come back to the three of them so that we okay? Dani, you introduce RIHAM.
Yes, for sure. It's a pleasure to me to introduce RIHAM. RIHAM is this incredible, amazing artist that I met, and I was very impacted by her work, by her thinking and the creative process. It was a very inspiring encounter. So RIHAM is a performance artist who brings together a range of practices: acting, singing, dancing, video, and explores new medium of live performance and multidisciplinary arts, creating visual spaces and video installations with integrated live performances. She is a to the space to promote art practices and offer workshops for anyone who wants to be engaged in arts and exploring their creative self. I'm very thankful for this space because I had the opportunity to explore my creative self, and it was incredible to see how RIHAM created these spaces where people can find ways to express. RIHAM's practice reflects on what it means to be producing innovative, multidisciplinary artistic work in Palestine in the current moment, exploring themes such as love, woman and resistance, public space, multiple selves, and collective imagination from the perspective of a woman and a citizen in occupied Palestine, full and profound on a wide range of pressing issues related to gender, politics, and arts, and so on and on. And I would let RIHAM choose for herself. Thank you, RIHAM, for being here.
Okay, what an introduction. First, I'm really humbled, and it's really an honor to be part of this roundtable or debate. And thank you, Dani and Fernando, for kind of curating this. I'm really happy to hear about like from DINA and MAHASEN's work. And I feel at this moment they are also like they are saying a lot of things that I want to say. So I'm asking myself now, what's another aspect I can add to that as well, as being a generation who grew up from the first Intifada back in 1987. So I was a child at that time. So I really felt like what Dina said when she said like how many traumas or how many incidents did we see, and I was just counting that last week, just with like my 37 years old, how many war crimes and intifadas and like horror that I've seen myself. And when will that stop? You know, it's a question of being a Palestinian, but also holding all of this pain and trauma and history, and it somehow relates to you, and at the same time you do want to feel normal at some point. You do want not to carry this this heavy cause, or this heavy not conflict, this heavy what can we call it, you know, occupation, or more than this. It's not just occupation, it's something that reflects the whole world of what is happening, you know. And we've talked about this, I think, me and you, Dani. And then when can we move across that? And passing this to our generation is also sad. It's I'm not feeling very I will not come here and say I'm the new generation and I have all this positivity to change, while you've seen that it has been a long history of struggle. And then you come to a point where you say, what it means to be Palestinian, and what it means to be a Palestinian artist, and what it means to be a Palestinian woman artist, and what it means to be someone who has their ambitions, who has their dreams, who I want to do my own work that speaks about something else than politics. You know, there is a lot of existential questions at this time, and also a lot of like, yes, we have that kind of what it says, like responsibility as someone who is aware and who can speak to the world. But at the same time, I agree with Dina when she says like there's a stigma, or there's an expectation of us being a Palestinian, of being a hero, or being someone who is not vulnerable and who's not tired, and who could be, you know, sometimes like sad from all of this, what is happening. So I think in this sense, I would say that this is how I reflect with my work. As you said, I'm a performance artist, and I am a multidisciplinary one who uses a lot of disciplines, because I come from an acting background. I'm an actress myself, but now I use my acting techniques and dancing and singing and video, and I do my own concept of work. And I think that producing art in Palestine is very challenging, and it's also challenging in many ways, also not just for the Palestinian audience, but also for the international audience, because there is this expectation of you of being a Palestinian artist, which I'm not running away from it, because I agree when MAHASEN said, you know, that the personal could be a politics as well. So in my work, I really dig into myself and into my personal experiences, and how I experience being a woman in Palestine, and how I experience being a woman in the Arab world and a woman in the world as well as being Palestinian who lived in Beit Sahur. So to tell you a little bit about my background, because that brings me to the piece that I told you about. So I come from a town called Bet Sahur. Bet Sahur is in Bethlehem, and Bet Sahur is a place where, you know, where it has did this popular resistance in the first Intifada in 1987, where there was this civil movement, and there was like this neighborhood committees who boycott the Israeli military, who boycott like buying anything from them, who did this, who also like you know, just refused the whole ideas of that they had from the Israeli government. So there was this mass movement while I was 6 years old. So just to tell you about my background and where I grew up in such an intense space, you know. And that brings me to my to the place that I grew up in, which was my great-grandfather's house, which I turned now to Art Salon, Salon Fenni, which you, Dani, came to, because I felt this old house means a lot to me when I was a little kid growing up in that neighborhood. Of course, now I moved out from it, but I've seen a lot in that house, especially during the first Intifada, where there was like a lot of resistance movements coming to our house, and like doing meetings, or some young people who are like 17 or 16 years old who are doing these roadblocks and like stones in the street so as to stop the tanks coming into the town, so as not to shoot or arrest someone, coming to our house and hiding, because it's a very, very old house. So it's barely kind of, nobody can imagine that somebody lives there. So in a way, I lived that time where, as we say in Palestine, this was like 5 years of our lives where we felt that there could be hope of freedom. So you can imagine how many times we hoped for freedom and how many times we then ended up with something that's either a peace agreement, or either somebody interfering from the outside world, or either somebody is interfering from the Palestinian itself, and just like not gaining that kind of hope or dream. So dreaming of freedom is also something that I think of, and is also something that I feel like, am I able to dream for freedom? And is the new generation are able to dream for freedom? And sorry if I'm being emotional, because it is an emotional time, I think, for all of us, and we are questioning all of this. And then, yeah, and I think this can reflect to a piece that I have done, because I would like to talk about it, and then I can leave the floor to you. Because from that time in the first Intifada, I've watched a lot of this, because it was a resistance with stones, and everybody knows that. So I've seen this movement and action of putting stones on the road, and it's such a heavy action. And in 2014, there was Kalandia Biennale, there was this international, Kalandia Biennale festival that was talking about archive and archiving, part of Khalil Zakakini Cultural Center. They were archiving the Intifada, the first Intifada. And my piece was kind of an archive of that time, but at the same time, how can you archive a history that is still present, you know? So in that time, there was this, as I said, like the popular resistance, and there was this demonstrations that went out with the stones. And I saw a photo of this famous, now she's becoming famous, called Micheline Awad, who held a stone in one hand and her yellow shoes in her other hand. And she was wearing a beautiful black kind of dress. And she was also putting a very nice yellow scarf. So that, as I said, at that time, after Sundays, going to church, they would go, everybody after the mass, they would go and demonstrate and throw stones at the Israeli soldiers. So for me, this was in my memory because I used to do that in my kids, when I was a kid as well. So for me, this is the resistance, not how the media now present it. It was women in there, it was children, it was my father, it was everyone, it was my uncles, everyone was in there. And, you know, I wanted to kind of re-embody that character who still lives. She's not dead, you know, she still lives. But I wanted to re-embody that character, and I dressed like her. And I also, the action that I have decided to do came as well from this action of moving a heavy stone, and someone who is, you know, as me, who's like fragile and petite, trying to push that stone. And I chose this action to do it in the streets of Ramallah, in the middle of the crowds crossing the streets, and, you know, just pushing the stone in one line, pushing and coming back, and pushing and coming back, and pushing and coming back. And I was like, it's like an infinity piece that I did for 2 hours with that kind of costume. But what I wanted to do with this project is somehow represent the ongoing like struggle, not struggle, also resistance, and the ongoing belief in succeeding or having this freedom. But then could it become a curse somehow, as Sisyphus' curse, who had this curse of putting the stone up the mountain and then coming down again and repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. So I think in this piece, I wanted to talk about this, and at the same time, I wanted to see how the crowd and how the streets would react to this. Are they going to come and push with me this stone? Are they going to be part of this resistance? Are they going just to watch me? Is this something that we or could be art, could be by itself a political work. Yeah.
Thank you very much, RIHAM. We're going to see the video, right? I mean, afterwards, I think perhaps we could see that. Yes, I think it would be nice. I would like just to mention a few words from what you three have said. Just to provoke and to trigger a conversation. We're also going to leave room for the audience to ask questions. So please, if you do have questions, people, you can write down, and we're going to collect them. Beginning from what, the first thing that came to my mind when Dina was speaking is the fact that also helped Dani and I think about this organization of this table, is the idea that the occupation happens in many fronts. Taking a word from Dina, right? That the attacks happens in different fronts. The occupation also happens in different fronts. This is something that is very astonishing and very impressive I was in Bethlehem, I was in Jerusalem, I was in Haifa, I was in Tel Aviv in 2019, and I could see how this happens in the streets, how this happens in the people we talk with. I mean, this is something that is there all the time. So this conversation, I think that something that brought to me that is very interesting, first of all, is this limit between what is individual and what is collective. I think the three of you somehow tackle these points very, very deeply, in the sense that this is an issue. And if we think of the occupation and if we think of Palestine as trans-territory, as a spatiality and not a space, as a territoriality, like Dina said, and not a territory, I think we very much get to this problem that is being put by you, right? What is individual, what is collective too? And I find it very interesting to put this together with what MAHASEN has said about writing history, right? I mean, the task of writing history, as I said before, as a work of memory, right? I mean, you're writing something that is not only past, but it's happening at the same time. We are living, we're experiencing, the occupation is happening at this time where we're living now. So this makes a very challenging, I think, perspective for us all, for you, I mean, mainly who live this, but for us all who want to understand and think about these problems. And I find it also, MAHASEN, very interesting, perhaps we can also talk about this afterwards, this issue of imagination that you brought. Because this very much also tackles some points we have been dealing with in Brazil. And when we think about the trauma of slavery, and also thinking about films as fabulating and narratives, as fabulating stories, as imagining stories that are not fiction, but they are creating and recreating somehow the experiences. I think that's what you mentioned. And again, this for me resonates very much with what RIHAM is saying about, and also the oral history that Dina mentioned before, right? But what RIHAM was saying about this archive history that is still present. How do you do an archive of what is still going on? And again, RIHAM, what something that touched me when I see the video of the stone on the road is the fact that you're dealing with some materialities and some subjectivities at the same time. It was very interesting to hear the conversation, really, because people were like arguing and discussing whether that should happen or not, whether that makes sense or not, whether that would be just like you know, just like a symbol or what it is, right? So there is something between the materialities and the subjectivities that I think the three of you have tackled in different perspectives, but I think this would be very interesting for us to hear. So I suggest perhaps that we begin by listening to you once again, and maybe MAHASEN could begin like replying to Dani's question before. What do you think? And then we get to listen to the others too. And then if we have the questions, we collect them. What do you think then? Can we do so? Thank you very much, RIHAM, also for your talk.
I should apologize. My connection got cut off, but now I'm back. Hopefully in full form and shape. So Danny, can you repeat your question, please?
Yes. So thank you so much, everyone. And so my question was about, in the movie, there is a moment that the narration says, it questions itself. Would we regret on future, like of taking the priority of the national liberation instead of our own rights as a woman? So, and I think this is a very, very interesting point of reflection that you bring, that it brings many layers. It's hard as a woman in that time and in nowadays, how also these historical decisions impact. So if you can speak a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I should say also that the narrative in this film, okay, the voiceover is based. It's, you know, it's my writing with my lovely cousin, in fact, and it's based on the research that and the records that I have collected in terms of women's memoirs from the times, in terms of newspapers articles from the times that published back then about that event. It was also based on you know, when women created conferences, they had the proceeds, right? And they would publish their speeches. They would publish the events. You know, they would describe the events that took place in these conferences. So in my hands, I had historical records from the archives that dealt with this type of information. And then I tried to weave all this material together from a point of view that the current generation of women are dealing with. So now, you know, women today with for instance, the Tal'at group, which is a feminist group in Palestine, you know, young women, and not only women, by the way, there are also guys who are involved in this movement as well. But, you know, they work on a very specific feminist mobilization. So the idea now is with such a mobilization, questions are now more open about the rights of marginalized groups. You know, we're talking about different types of marginalized groups, right? Including women, LGBTQ, you know, children. And we are saying, you know, like now the question is, how would all these rights, yeah, be part and in parcel of the national rights, in quotation, national rights meaning liberation, right? From the colonial settler colonialism, from the occupation of the State of Israel. So these questions now are very much overlapping. Previously, they were not, you know. Previously, it was a question of, you know, do we get our, and by the way, until I would believe, until the Oslo peace process, you know, women were still, Palestinian women were still saying, it is through the land that we will, it's through the state that we will get our rights. So this is where things now, you know, this is where the questions came from. And also, yes, I mean, you raised an important point here is, you know, there's always the space to reflect on what type of decisions are we making? Are we making the right decisions for the futures? Are these decisions for, you know, are they decisions that we are just dealing with the status quo? You know, what are the ramifications of the decisions that we take today on the future?
Hi, is it possible to come in?
Yes, please, Dina.
Yeah, thank you so very much, and thank you for meeting all everyone. ريحام انتي جارة. أنا من بيت جالة أصلي. Okay, speaking in Arabic, saying that we are neighbors actually. So I know Beit Sahur, Beit Jala, and Beit Lahem obviously very, very well. But I wanted to respond to, you know, also to kind of, you know, MAHASEN mentioned a very important point, which is the, you know, the evolution of women's movements, and the way that the concerns of Taliat and then I think the other one is called Niswat or something like that, and they are very much using social media platforms to talk about the need to liberate women at home first, before the liberation of the homeland. And so in a sense, the demands are changing, but obviously it is contextual. It depends on the context. So things have changed with what is happening right now. But in relation to what you were saying, Fernando, is the idea of memory. You know, memory must be mediated. You know, the idea of memory, there's a mediation process there. And I wrote about that in the book, which is you need the narrator, you need a narrator and the narrated, and you need to have, you know, the narrator telling the story of and the narrated, who are you speaking for? So in a sense, that kind of, for me in the book, which is, I'm not actually talking about myself, I'm kind of acting as a mediator to try and tell or recount or retell the stories of the remembering of other people. And I think it's important to make a distinction between memory and the act of remembering. And this becomes, because, you know, much has been written around memory as being a form of resistance to power, as a form of kind of re-establishing a different historical narrative. And of course, history, as we know, or as the saying goes, is always written by the victor, not by the victim. So the act of remembering, for me, is the political act. The act itself becomes very important. Susan Sontag has written about this. And of course, the act of remembering is important as a way of bringing or making something visible. And it's really so exciting to be on the same panel with RIHAM and MAHASEN, and their work is just kind of thinking about these moments that they are capturing, that are historical moments, even if they are in the present. They are historical moments, and that are really very impressive to see them being received in such a positive way.
Thank you, Dina. Maybe we should see the video now, Fernando. What do you think? RIHAM's
I think it's a good idea.
Performance.
Yeah, good idea.
Yes, and then RIHAM continue.
Yeah.
Analu, can you?
تلعب حديد هون تلعب حديد
ريهام تلعبي حديد؟ لا هذا عرض فني للحجر للانتفاضة، تذكير للانتفاضة.
مش هيك تذكير، احنا كتاب بنعرف برضه بنعرف كيف
لا ما هو هذا
المظاهر يعني
كسمبل.
في هذه المظاهر في حال انه انتهى الاحتلال، بدهم يذكروا الناس في الاحتلال وكذا، بذكروهم في الانتفاضة الأولى، ولكن الاحتلال ما زال موجود، بإمكانهم انه يكون هذا العمل حقيقي.
ان شاء الله بيكون حقيقي،
يكون حقيقي على ارض الواقع. شو اللي بمنع يعني
ان شاء الله ما راح
يعني نموذج بيكون مجسم لشيء زال، لكن الشيء كان ما زال موجود.
بس هي اليوم المظاهرة الفنية، بس المظاهرة الفنية
تجسيد الواقع يعني،
لا
تجسيد الانتفاضة الأولى،
هي تذكير الناس بالانتفاضة.
نعم،
تذكيرهم انه كان في انتفاضة وكان في لها رموز كثير، والحجر واحد سيمبول من يعني رمز للانتفاضة،
هو رمز للانتفاضة، ولكن يعني في مظاهر كثيرة بيقدر الواحد يعبر عنها برضه في نفس الوقت، يعني الاحتلال ما زال موجود، وانه هذه المظاهر اصبحت مجرد ذكرى، يعني مجرد امور رموز وكذا، بالرغم من انه
RIHAM. So can you comment
It's,
a little bit?
I think it's always funny for me, this conversation between my mother and this man. And it's also because it's my mother is his age, I would say. So they are coming from the same generation. So it's also the woman, the female and male talk about it. So my mother finds that it's a very important thing to do, to re-embody and to reenact and to do this and to let people see these kind of symbols, even the Palestinian themselves. And the man was like, he was like, this should be a resistance now, to do something now, you know? So I think this is also an interesting conversation of what we were saying about how do we also be in the streets as women. And you've seen me, like, it was a crowded with many men around me. So like, I think the work speaks for itself. I think I don't like to really talk a lot about it, but I think there's a dimension of that kind of thing that I'm missing these days. But I think we are finding it more. Women are being in the streets and are in the struggle, and it's still going. Like our voices are there, but you see that there is also a freedom, a liberation of women, which I think I'm really concerned about. And in my work, I do a lot of that as well, gender and women issues. And I don't like to call it women issues, but, you know, gender, because, yeah, that's one of the resistance that we kind of, that is taken over because of the political situation that we live in as well. So I like to bring that on the table as well.
Can I ask a question? Because I'm sorry, I have to leave very soon. Apologies to everyone. I was looking at, you know, that's such a powerful, and of course, because I understand the Arabic and the conversation, it was very powerful. But, you know, you were wearing yellow shoes and I really wanted to have, you know, I really found that so expressive in a sense. And, you know, with the black dress and the yellow shoes, and then the man coming to help you and then performing the stand on his head. So it's a collaborative work in many ways, but I just wanted to ask that question. You know, it's a silly question, but I thought I should ask it.
What, the yellow shoes? It was because of the photo of Micheline Awad, the photo of her. I wanted to, and it was kind of, I was trying to find the yellow shoes, and I couldn't find the yellow shoes that looked like her shoes. So it was the archive that I went into in the first Intifada, and her photo was like striking for me. So I tried to find that shoes, and I painted it actually, so as to have this yellow shoes. And I was trying to find also similar outfit to her. So it was intentional, and that's why, you know, with high heels pushing them, you know, that this is the symbols. I think this is the symbol of resistance as well, that it is that people were, you know, like they don't, like, people were elegant somehow, but in a way they were coming out from the church. So it's, or coming out from their houses. So it's not always one photo. It's not always men with guns, as we say. Yeah. The feminine, feminine side.
Yeah, I have a question that perhaps it's also silly, but I think it's interesting because do you, RIHAM, experience an issue for the fact of being a woman? There is the first comment that they make there is whether you are a bodybuilding, because I mean they are, I think they're saying, I mean, how can you be doing that as a woman? I think I don't know, but for me this also is something interesting because you were very, I mean, you're dressed up very feminine, and this is something that is impacting also there, right? Again, I think this tackles very much this issue of the individual and the collectiveness. I would really like to listen a bit more from you If it's you three, I think it would be interesting if MAHASEN or so, because I think this is very much weaving the problems you are bringing to us. There is an issue that is related to what is the individual, and then there is the woman, there is the Palestinian, and there is an issue that is related to the collectiveness, which is this idea of transtemporality, of transterritoriality that we're talking about. My question is, how do you feel confronted with this in the work you do? I mean, is it something you think before doing the work? Is it something you are worried about when you are preparing some kind of work, either in the film or in your performances, RIHAM?
Definitely, I think this was part of it. Why I wanted to be like this, with this sense of fragility. Me being by myself in that action. I could have said to other people to come and help me, but I think I wanted to be by myself because I wanted to bring that aspect of women being part of the resistance. But at the same time, I think going publicly in the streets of Ramallah, where I'm not hiding as well, is somehow an action of resistance as well for women. And I think that's what I say, like I'm very, I am so much about that. I'm so much about, like having this, how can we liberate ourselves as an individual? So I really start with myself. I think there is a long struggle to gain women rights and to gain this kind of, this kind of strength to be in the streets where you feel like you're owning it. But I tend to be brave in my work, but somehow not also very attacking in a sense. So I always think about my culture, where I come from. And I think that there's things that could be acceptable and there are things that could not be acceptable. So if you want to make change in the woman's status, then you really, you have to think about what is acceptable in a society that you live in. But at the same time, you need to challenge. So what is this? There is this balance between those two. It's like how to challenge, how do I want to say what I want to say? But there's at the same time to have these kind of debates that happens between, like in the video, they not being rejected, but to be accepted in a way. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that's what I always try to do in my work as now I'm doing a work about love and relationships. And I think this is totally about having the woman the right to decide about her marriage life. And even if you are single in your 30s, not to feel that shame of not doing what the society has built for you, and to feel also like that it's okay that you don't want to follow what the society has built for you or told you to do or structured you to do. So that's I would say that this work that I'm doing, which is very romantic and about love and about relationships, is also very political at the same time. But I would love to also hear from MAHASEN. I think she would also have some comments about this thing.
This is so wonderful, RIHAM, because I fully understand, and I call it agency and negotiations, right? We are in this continuous process of negotiation, no matter on the personal and on the collective level, or in other words, in the domestic sphere and in the public sphere. We are always negotiating. We are always trying to create this presence. Whether, for instance, now with the phenomena of a lot of women changing attire and you know, society turning more into religion, let's say, you know, where you see women more wearing the hijab, for example, right? But yet, you know, I also think, and I see this all the time with my students, is even our attire, you know, becomes a way to negotiate. So the way, you know, you dress, the way, for instance, with the majority of people, the way, you know, you wear your scarf, you know, being, you know, and you see it with young people, you know, I called it the modern hijab, for instance. I'm a bit digressing, but my point is, you know, we are always in this continuous process of negotiation. We negotiate the family, we negotiate our boss, you know, we negotiate also women, you know, but, you know, ultimately we negotiate the patriarchal structure, whether it's colonization, whether it's local patriarchy, you know, it's the patriarchal structure. And I think, you know, this is where Fernando, the collective and the personal becomes interesting, you know, because then, you know, you've got artists like RIHAM, who's actually putting her personal print onto how she sees things, how she deciphers things, how she is reenacting different instances that or different points in time that she wants us to stop at, you know, that she wants us to say, that she's telling us, hey, this is important, you know, there is something here that we need to look at, there is something here that we need to talk about. And I love this piece of work, RIHAM, because again, you know, it's and I love the way you did the reenactment, because yes, it's like, it makes me think that, yeah, women were part of the resistance, no matter, you know, where they were. Exactly, you know, a woman coming, you know, very elegantly dressed, you know, with high heels, which is completely, you know, out of this world to be throwing stones with high heels, you know, but yet she found herself in this moment in time with the crowd, and that's how she reacted. Probably that was the most, what made sense to her. The most thing that made sense to her is to pick a stone from the street and participate, because everyone was doing it and she also wanted to be part of that. So, you know, the spontaneity also that I sense in your work. And again, you know, I think this is where, you know, your personal outlook on that situation. And I think, you know, Fernando, this is one example of how the personal is brought about. You know, also for me, when I think about the personal issues, you know, I really take it home. I think about my identity, you know, as a woman who's today living in Palestine, who's, you know, doing the work that I'm doing, you know, also the background that I come from, having a child, being a single mother, you know, all of these things feed into what the personal is. And how you start thinking about, for instance, for me, you know, the lives that the women that I'm writing about through film lived. You know, how did they negotiate the patriarchal structures? You know, how did they? And again, it's the day-to-day. I think the question here with the personal is, how do you go about doing your day-to-day business? You know, how do you go about with the daily tasks that you have to do, you know, as a mother, as a professional, as a lecturer, as a filmmaker, you know, as a father, as a and I think, you know, this is where it becomes a fertile ground, you know, to also connect the personal and the collective.
Say, Danny. Yeah, very interesting, Mas. And I think what you're saying, I mean, for me, it sounds like this challenge of connecting these issues, right? It's not talking about either one thing or another, but personal and collective is the issue, in fact. I mean, both of them all together, and how we agency them, how we negotiate them. This also brings me another point. I don't know, Danny, do you have a question, Danny, please?
No, keep going. Go ahead.
Just another point. It's the same issue somehow, because something that Dina mentioned, and that I also find it very important when I am talking in congresses. And so, I mean, how do you deal with the fact that this is an exception? I mean, the fact of being a Palestinian and the occupation itself as a long duration process is an exception, but it's not an exception either. I mean, it's part of the ordinary. So I was just here thinking out loud from from what you said, how much this is also part of the negotiation. I mean, do you follow me? Does this make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. And also, I think what is also very important is how do we bridge these experiences to other places in the world, where now I see, for instance, in Brazil, the political is, the slogan, younger generations are using the slogan that I'm seeing here today, which is, previously it was the personal is political. Today it's the political is personal. And this resonates, and it echoes so much with what's happening here. So I think with time we are seeing how our grievances are actually again becoming closer. So we don't really live in these disconnections. Yeah. As human beings, the structural systems of oppression that we are all facing are at the end, I think, very similar, if they're not one.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mahasen. Yes, and I do believe that in the moment that we look to these grievances and see the structures of power operating and the kind of strategies that individuals find out. Like for me, during all the presentations and also with what we watched, first MAHASEN movie and also now the performance of RIHAM, I was very moved to think about this woman body. As MAHASEN was saying, like there are also the ordinary life, how this woman body encounter the occupation and encounter the ways to resist and creates different possibilities for a dream. Like RIHAM said, are we able to dream for freedom? Also, Dina said things about this and about remembering feelings. What I found very special, MAHASEN, in your documentary is that even if this is like the memories that you are showing in the movie are not your memories, but at the same time they are your memories as a Palestinian woman. So I think this is the interface that Fernando was in a way pointing about, this collective and individual and personal, and remembering feelings of the woman struggle back in the pre-Nakba, and also remembering feelings of post-Nakba, of Intifada, and also the current moment, as Dina was saying about like counting how many times we face this situation of intense crisis, because as the work of each one of you brings to us is there's ongoing resistance, ongoing way of being Palestinian that is being recreating ways of life. And I'm really honored to have this opportunity of hearing a little bit more about each one of you, like your work experience and moment, right? So I don't know if any of you want to say some last words, if there is anything that you point.
I would like to say something. I think this was a very beautiful conversation, and I think there's a lot of layers. And I also saw your film MAHASEN and a long time ago, and I really enjoyed it as well, because that brings also, like, I felt connected to the women who are before that, like where we say like in the 20s and before that, and now where we are now. But also I would like to say that we are ordinary people. We feel like anyone in the world feels. We are also ordinary women, you know. We are not people who can wake up every day thinking about resistance and the struggle. Like, I think I've seen people in the demonstration who are tired, who are screaming, who are crying, who are exhausted, children and adults. So I think it's somehow it's becoming part of our life, but it also depends on the intensity of it each day, because we have to think about also as well, like our lives, and to move on and to kind of keep resisting, but but also, like, you know, we are humans. We are human beings by the end of the day. We find our ways of living in this life as a situation that I think not we only live. Each place has its specific. So yeah, I wanted to end with that note. I think that's very important as well, to give this permission for us to be not this good Palestinian, you know.
Okay. Mahasen, do you want to say some words? I was told here by the organization that we have 2 minutes, 3 minutes or so.
I just want to thank everyone for this really wonderful discussion that's just filled with a lovely energy, you know, solidarity and love. So really, thank you so much. And I don't know if the audience has any questions. Maybe we can have, I don't know, we can check that out.
I'm afraid we don't have time for this.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry then. So we have to say goodbye and thank you very much, Mahasen, RIHAM, Dani too, right? It is a pleasure to talk to you and to get to know you. I wish I had met you when I was in Bethlehem, RIHAM and Mahasen too. I mean, let's see for the next time. So thank you very much. Dani, you want to say the last words?
No, just thank you, Fernando, for this also co-working. It was really a pleasure to me. Thank you for the film festival, for bringing this opportunity to Brazil, to get to know more about the Arab world from different perspectives. And this was a pleasure. Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Thank
you so
you.
much.
thank you.
It was amazing. I'd like just to do a final word for the audience that if you haven't watched Mahasen's film yet, it's still available until next Tuesday. So you can check the website that it's there. The film is called The Silent Protest, Jerusalem 1929. There are also 2 other films directed by Palestinian women, Letter to a Friend by Emily Jassir and When Things Occur by Oraib Tukan. So check it out, and thank you once more for being here and providing this amazing roundtable, amazing discussion, and yeah, thank you, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, thank you. Bye.